goes to right. Russell Westbrook.
You love the Philadelphia Eagles. Let me get a hell yeah!
What's up, guys? What's going on? It is Dives, Mr. Crockpot on Twitter. Welcome to Party on Broad. Party on Broad can be found on iTunes and Spotify. Hit that subscribe button, guys. If you guys are here watching us on the Painted Line YouTube channel, joining us today is John Russell 215 on Twitter. What's up, JR?
What's up, brother? Thanks for having me on. This is awesome. Glad to talk some Eagle stuff with you.
I'm psyched, man. I'm psyched. It is the day after the draft. Quick, man, what was your kind of quick grade on this draft before we get into the nitty gritty of today's pod?
I feel like everybody initially jaw dropping, like what the hell are we doing? But after time to reflect, listen to Howie, listen to Doug, so some of the beat writers, I've actually tremendously changed my outlook on this draft to where it's actually pretty positive, and hopefully we can kind of change some Eagles fans' minds a little bit too.
I'm one of them, man. Yesterday I did a podcast with Rob Lange, and my grade was a D. I'm still hurting. I am reeling from that Jalen Hurts pick. That day 2 massacre is what I'll call it, and I feel better today. I honestly feel better today. I'm kind of if I had to give a grade, I was a D yesterday. I would probably be around that like D plus C minus range. And we're going to talk today about our top 3 takeaways from this draft, because there's a lot to talk about, not just the players they picked, but the philosophy changes, everything going on with the Philadelphia Eagles in that front office too. If there's anything we know, this was Andy Weidl's first draft, and I think that there's been some significant things happen over the past few days. Let's start off with you, man. What's one of your top takeaways from this draft?
One of my top takeaways was that this Eagles team is turning a new leaf. Clearly, they're separating themselves from old school of thinking. If you think back, even in the early 2000s, we would load up on big corners, physical, 6'1", 6'2", big guys at the line, the Bobby Taylor types. Big receivers as well. We saw in the past, we would try, can we find the next Dez? Can we get a big receiver in here? I think our philosophy's changed completely. I think Kansas City and New Orleans are huge because of that. I think Doug is seeing what's going on and says, I want a team like that. I want speed. I don't really care about size. I want speed. And I see us turning that new leaf in this draft. Looking at it, it's just all burners. It's exciting. If you're going in that direction, this is an exciting team that he's putting together right now.
Yeah, that goes along with mine as well. One of my top takeaways is speed, and more speed. If there's anything to know out of this draft, man, is 100%. I mean, Howie Roseman told us, literally 2 or 3 weeks after the season, he spoke during that press conference. Is like, we need to get younger, we need to get faster, and just inject all that across the roster. And that was pretty evident throughout this entire draft. I mean, you look at the wide receiver position, man, it's just really interesting. You got Jaylen Rhaegar in the first round, and then you have a bunch of guys from Marquise Goodwin to just a bunch of 4-4, 4-3 burners, X guys that can stretch the defense. What's your take on these wide receivers? Do you expect any of them to make an impact in 2020?
I know I'm going to be alone in this, as a bunch of the points with this podcast. I'm going to be alone in a lot of these things, but I love it. I see all of these receivers that we added in the draft and the Marquise Goodwin with the trade makes 4-2 contributing this year. Now, we restructured Marquise Goodwin's contract because, in part, none of his deal was guaranteed. He was set to make around $2 million, but incentives could be up to around $5 million. Howie restructured. He's a little over $1 million a year guaranteed this year. And it's a really team-friendly contract. And for a guy who ran a 4.27 40 when he came into the league, guys got wheels. So I love it. Rhaegar, I know you hit on that the other day, and there's some people who are saying it's too early. And I heard people comparing him to Nelson Aguilar.
No.
First off, he's more built than Nelson. He's smaller, and he is a burner. Rhaegar ran a 4.22 unofficial 40. Aguilar ran a 4.42. That's tremendously different. So this is a very different receiver. So get that out of your heads if you think this is Aguilar 2.0. I think with the speed is we also have to talk about the defense too. We added guys in this draft on defense that are speed. They're built to cover tight ends or running backs into the flats. Howie's given Jim Schwartz some weapons here to play with. I like it.
And let's go back to that turning a new leaf part, because is that any cause for concern? I know you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, it's clear that the Eagles want to follow that mold. They want speed all over the place. However, the bones of the Philadelphia Eagles has always been Jim Schwartz, Jim Johnson, you name it, build on the lines and build in the secondary. And that's kind of been their MO for a long, long time. That's, to me, you stop the run and you run the ball. Like, that's like football to me. That's how you win a championship. However, do you see the way the NFL is going? We're going to talk about the Saints probably in a little bit. Are the Eagles? I mean, I even go back further. You look at this entire offseason, and they're building around versatile, positionless players. And that's kind of been also their MO. Hybrid linebacker safeties, hybrid safety cornerbacks, all these guys that can provide different positions. When I think of Jaylen Rhaegar, I think of a guy that can line up from the outside to the inside, guys that can kind of stretch the field, but also give you something in the slot. So to your point, that turning a new leaf thing, I think that's a really good point, because for as long as I lived, it's always been about getting to the quarterback, stopping the run, and putting all your assets on that offensive and defensive line. So I don't know. Is that a good thing? Do you see this new wave, this new kind of thinking, kind of the future of the NFL?
Well, I want to say when we're thinking it's a new leaf and a new turn, we still have Fletcher, Malik Jackson, and Hargrave in the middle for D tackles. Like, you're not running up the middle on us. So when you do that, you don't need these big prototypical linebackers like we traditionally had with, the Trotter types. We don't need that anymore when you have such big bodies up front. You need guys who are fast and athletic who can cover tight ends out of the backfield. And I think Jim Schwartz got some great playmakers to do that. Kevin Wallace is going to be a stud. If you ever watched his tape, number 12 in Clemson, he lined up everywhere, very similar to Malcolm Jenkins, but younger and faster. And then Devon Taylor, he's a little raw, but this guy is a missile. Go on YouTube and type his name and watch him light up people. That's somebody Jim Schwartz is going to be ecstatic about, because you're going to put him outside and say, follow that tight end all around and don't let him touch the ball. And they're not going to be able to. Yeah. So with this new leaf, like, we still have seeds from Jim Johnson and in the middle and being tough, but then we're also changing and evolving, which I think we needed to do tremendously.
I fully agree, brother. I fully agree. Another one of my takeaways is I don't expect much out of this draft class. And what I mean by that, you look at Jaylen Rhaegar, I think he's going to be outstanding. I think this is the next superstar in Philadelphia. I was completely fine with taking him at 21. In my no lie, when a lot of my mock drafts that I've been doing for the last 4 months, I wanted to slightly trade back in that first and take Jaylen Rhaegar, maybe use some assets and trade up to the top of the second round. I would rather not talk about the day two, because that just gets me pissed off.
We'll talk about it.
But you look at these players that the Eagles have drafted, and I'm not fully confident in Howie Roseman and 2020, because I look at a lot of these guys that are not going to make a big impact. Yes, Jalen Rhaegar is going to be awesome next year. Him and Carson are going to be really, really fun to watch. Jalen Hurts, man. Jalen Hurts, he will most likely be holding a clipboard next year. Let's put it like this. If Jalen Hurts gets significant amount of snaps next year, that means Carson is hurt, and that means basically the season is over. At best, Jalen Hurts plays in run-specific packages. At worst, Philadelphia just drafted a backup quarterback in the second round. And, this noise that Jalen Hurts could be the next Taysom Hill is just so stupid. I just can't get over this, because Hill wasn't even a second round pick. He was an undrafted free agent, and he played 22% of the snaps for the New Orleans Saints. So let's pump the brakes here and think logically what we think a second round pick should be, and what goes into a second round pick. A second round pick is a starter. A second round pick is an impact guy. So, in fact, Taysom Hill played more special teams than he did on offense last year. Second round picks need to be starters. You don't take a gadget guy in that second round. When I to preface, I loved the Jaylen Rhaegar pick. I was really pissed off as well that we didn't get CeeDee Lamb. But going into day 2, I was like, all right, there are so many great targets in that second round. There was Jeremy Chin was available. Christian Fulton was available. Logan Wilson was available. Like real impact players, ready to win now players. And you look at guys like Jalen Hurts, Davion Taylor's super raw. Don't expect anything more from special teams. This guy didn't play football in high school. This is a really cool story. For religious purposes, they didn't allow him to play high school ball. He's got a ton of athleticism, a ton of upside. I'm not, denying that. I really can't wait to see Davion Taylor. He was one of my favorite players in this draft, but not in the third round, man. You don't take a raw developmental player in the third round. You just don't do that. And then I look at these wide receivers. I love Kayvon Wallace. You nailed it with Kayvon. He's going to be outstanding. But you look at the rest of this. Jack Driscoll, versatile guy. Maybe at best he becomes a backup. John Hightower, Quez Watkins, Marquise Goodwin, all those guys, they're probably not going to be on the roster. And it's one of those things where part of maybe a new leaf is that this draft was supposed to be about building around Carson Wentz. And we just got some guys. And you got some guys that they're not going to impact 2020. Maybe 2-3 years from now, they could be really fun. But that's my take. That's kind of why my grade is so low, is because we're supposed to be in win now mode, man.
Where do you want me to start? Let's start with our second round pick, who, not just like you, majority does not like it. I think this number 2 pick was a direct reflection of last year and how it ended. Yeah. Now, we just dumped $128 million into the quarterback position. We gave Carson a huge contract. So with that being said, you can't allocate more money to that position to be a backup. But then how do you get a good backup? You're not going to go out and get Jameis or Cam Newton and pay them $10 million, $12 million for 1 year. Hell, we paid Josh McDowell $6 million for last year, and he was 80 years old. Doug said that will never happen. I'm not going to waste this team and this talent to have an inadequate backup quarterback. So now we got Jalen Hurts, who has won at 2 different major programs. He's been a Heisman finalist back-to-back years in a row, and he's going to be under contract for 5 years. We're paying him $750,000 a year. He's not even making $1 million a year. He's not going to challenge Carson to get playing time. He's not going to be a disturbance in the locker room. He's going to be a guy that if Carson goes down for a week or two, let's say Carson gets a hit to the head, and Doug's like, you're sitting for a week. With our RPO offense, Jalen Hurts can step in and win you a week or two and keep the ship afloat, so that if we're 5-1 and Carson goes down, Hurts can come in, he can win you a game or two. Carson can come back and be healthy. The ship stays the same. And instead of, I guess the only thing I can think is Howie and Doug said, instead of investing in a third or second linebacker or a fourth or fifth wide receiver in that spot, I'm locking up insurance for my franchise quarterback for 5 years for very cheap. That's the only thing I can think of. And if that's the case, that's smart to me. That's smart because you have your insurance policy.
That's it. And there's a couple of things that come out of this Jalen Hurts thing. It's one, it is 100% an insurance policy, because the only main take out of this is that they think Carson Wentz will not be healthy the rest of his career. That is the only way I see this. There's no way you're going to flip this guy for more than a second round pick 3 or 4 years from now. That's just not happening. And that makes me depressed. The fact that they're like fully telling the fans that, guess what? We don't believe Carson Wentz can play 16 games in a season. We're going to need a high draft pick to give him some sort of break during the season, or maybe a week or two of support. But, I mean, you just don't do that in the second round.
But here's the thing. We don't know. What we do know is Mike Mayock and John Gruden love this kid. We also know that the Colts love this kid. So there's other teams out there that were thinking about Jalen Hurts. And so when were they thinking to move up to get him? When could they have got him? Howie said, go get your guy season. Went out and got Jalen Hurts at very cheap and locked him up for 5 years. And now let's put all the rest of the money into other aspects of the team. Now, another point you brought up previously was that you don't think a lot of these guys are going to be on the roster. I think they are. I think they're not just bodies. I think that last year, again, direct reflection of this draft, we went into week 11, 12, 13 with pulling guys out of the stands to play wide receiver. Howie said that's never going to happen again. I'm never going to allow that happen again. We had no depth at speed and wide receiver. So even if you're putting 2 or 3 of these guys on the practice squad, they're going to be there for us. They're going to be reserve dogs in the background ready to run. And we all know hungry dogs run faster, and these guys run fast as hell. They're going to run fly patterns. They're going to run Z routes. They're just going to be clearing out the middle, and our big 2 tight ends are going to be open up down there eating. So I think that they will be. I think Hightower especially has a chance to win the kick returner, punt returner job. I think Quez Watkins, if this was a different year, may have been a 4th or 5th round pick at receiver. But this year was just so deep at wide receiver. He slid back a little bit, but he has speed, and you can't teach that. So when it comes down to it, sure, they might not be an impact in the first 7 weeks, but maybe weeks 7 through 16. We all know in the middle of the NFL season, after you hit that midpoint, it's like the next season already started. So maybe they do come into play there, and that's what we needed because we didn't have those chess pieces last year.
If there's anything positive out of this, and I hope you're right, man. I hope to God you are right, is that hopefully this means that the Eagles are going to cut ties with Alshon, and hopefully they even move on from J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Because if you had all these guys, I would 100% keep Greg Ward in that slot. At times, put Jaylen Rhaegar in the slot, then have to go through another season of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. I don't. There's nothing there for me to keep him on this roster. I'd rather have speed. What about you?
My friends have said the same thing about Arcega-Whiteside, and it's been 1 year removed. And the only thing I can rebuttal to say what Howie and Doug thinks is you can't teach intangibles. This guy has size. He has strength. He's got hands that are huge. He's a red zone target, and they're not ready to give up after 1 year.
You're right.
Alshon's different. I don't think Alshon ever put on an Eagles helmet again, which is sad because he got us a Super Bowl, and I always love him for that. But the time's come, he's gone. So when you need that big red zone target, I think that's where Whiteside will play a role. But if you're talking, 20 in between the 20s, then I don't see Whiteside really helping out. When you get down the red zone, I see more packages for him, I think.
I agree. All right. Do you have another takeaway, man?
You know what? The linebacker we drafted Driscoll. The lineman we drafted Driscoll. I really don't hate the pick. The kid's huge. But he had a bad draft grade because he didn't have long arms. And to be a tackle in the NFL, you need long arms to get a good push off for press protection. Mm-hmm. But I think he's got a great head on his shoulders, and he can learn both tackles and both guard positions. Yep. Kind of like where we had Vaitai could fill in anywhere we kind of needed him, which ended up being pretty key because during the season, people go down. So if we can have this kid Driscoll really learn the playbook and be able to step in at 4 different spots on the offensive line, that's like a switch army knife that we really need it.
Yeah, I like Driscoll. But there are other guys there that I thought were kind of better fits. I did not like trading down with Dallas. Sorry, dude. Tyler Biadasz is a really good player, a really good center. That would have been a very value pick there to kind of mold, Jason Kelsey's successor. I would have been good with James Prochet. You're drafting you're drafting all of these Z guys for the outside. It's kind of like their cornerback position. They have a bunch of guys that kind of play all over the place. That's how I see the wide receiver. It's just strictly Z guys. Why not upgrade the slot? I'm fine if you bring in Marquise Goodwin. I'm fine if you get Quez Watkins and all these guys, but at least kind of change it up. Get a guy like James Prochet that catches everything. That's something that the Eagles significantly struggled with, drop passes. James Prochet he's probably the best in the draft in terms of catching the ball, right?
Yeah, I had him targeted for the Eagles too. I wanted him as well. But again, I'm just trying to put myself in Howie and Doug's head. And I think we're going to see a lot more with maybe Ertz split out a little bit wider with Dallas Goedert sitting in single tight end sets. Maybe move Ertz out a little bit. Not really like a slot, but more like a hybrid slot where he can control that 10 to 15 yards off the line of scrimmage. You just got to think Howie and Doug's head is just moving. Like, what can we do different with what we have? And the NFL, like we said earlier, is moving to speed. So now we have a lot of D-backs. We have a lot of receivers. Nobody's getting tired. Everybody's running in. It's like a high school or college program where you're just circling in now.
Yeah, what's the one thing the Eagles do most, and that's run 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets. And what do you need to do that? You need 2 guys on the outside, 2 burners to stretch the field. And you're right, man. I'm pretty sure they've led the NFL in 12 personnel the last 2 years. I don't think that's going anywhere in terms of offense.
Yeah, and I don't think it's been close either. I think the next team under that was Kansas City or New Orleans, but it was significantly lower. So those RPOs, as Doug's MO, and he's got to say, well, what can I do? And I think Hurts helps with that. He can learn in and step and do that. He takes a lot of time off the line of scrimmage to get rid of the ball to his receivers, but with an RPO, that helps him out so much more. And Doug likes to run that. So that's got to be his thinking.
I think of Jalen Hurts, and this is Philadelphia, man. Game 1 of the preseason, Jalen Hurts goes in there, goes 10 for 12, throws 150 yards, two scores, and the entire Philadelphia media is going to be gnarling at the teeth to find some sort of bad relationship between Carson and Jalen Hurts. I just feel so bad for Jalen Hurts, man. That's like kind of, it was attached to my day 2 misery, was like just a missed opportunity, man. That guy's walking into just a fucking train wreck. And knowing the way the media is, knowing the way how divisive the Philly fan is, it's just going to be brutal, man. That's where I went.
Here's another reason why I think Doug took Jalen when he did, is because everything Jalen Hurts has been through in his life has been controversy and playing time, and you can't do it or you can do it. He's not like that. Between the ears, this guy is one of the best dudes around. You could ask anybody who played in Alabama or Oklahoma. They'll go to bat for him and they'll die for this dude. They love him. And I don't think he's the one to come to Carson and say, I want your job. I'm here. I earned it. I'm a second-round pick. I think Hurts wants to settle in, learn the system, learn the city, and be happy to just be in this locker room with this group of players.
You're right. And that goes into my last main takeaway here, is that the Jalen Hurts selection was one of the all-time worst picks in Eagles history. We touched on a lot of this, so I'll keep it short, but there were just so many fantastic fits in that second round. Instead of getting insurance at a position of strength, why in the world do you not fill a hole where you are so undermanned? At least in my opinion, the Eagles were in no position to think they can increase resources for the future, than rather fill in the holes right now in the present. It's just the dumbest pick I've ever seen. And there's been a lot of them, man, like Freddie Mitchell, Marcus Smith, Sidney Jones, Danny Watkins. The list goes on and on and on. If you were to just take away pick number 53, it's amazing how my whole viewpoint of this draft completely shifts. And I don't get it. I don't get the Jalen Hurts pick. It changed everything. There was such a trickle-down effect from this pick in terms of positions of need. And I like what they did at the linebacker spot. I think Sean Bradley and Davion Taylor are going to be really fun. I'm a big Temple fan, so of course I'm already trying to find my Sean Bradley jersey.
Love that.
Oh, yeah. I was so happy about that pick. I think it's going to be great. But that Jalen Hurts, man, I am still scratching my head. That is the one thing about this draft. Everyone will remember the Jalen Hurts draft, and that's what this is.
That's the number one thing between Philly fans and everyone else. And this is no shot on you. This is a shot to our fan base, because it's just how we're brought up by our parents, sitting up in the 700 level, the vet. That's how we're brought up, is that we differ from what the front office thinks. The front office decided on their notepad, circled and written big, bold letters, that backup quarterback was a glaring hole, and they needed to address it, and they need to address it cheap. Howie's a cap guy. He got what he thinks is the best backup for Carson Wentz at the cheapest price possible. So right now, you can be pissed. We can all be pissed. But next year, let's say some freak accident happens and Carson gets hit in the head again and has to go out of the game and wants to play, but he can't because of league rules. Hurts steps in, wins us a game, and keeps us all fine. And then everyone's like all happy because we're still on a winning streak and everything is the same. Like, I think that's what they're thinking. We're not going to let our franchise quarterback have a freak injury and the whole season's ruined.
I mean, do you remember, not like a decade ago? I don't know if you remember when they tried to fit Michael Vick in the offense with Donovan McNabb. Do you remember that, man? What was the result of that? Because all I remember is McNabb being completely pissed off and complained about it all the time. It disrupted the flow of the offense. McNabb, he actually saw the writing on the wall at the time. I mean, tell me, if Hurts is out there making plays, the Eagles fans are going nuts, that it's not going to cause some sort of chaos in that locker room. I just have no doubt that the media is going to find this narrative where they can find it, and they're going to find some sort of discord between Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts and then amplify it tenfold. I just have no doubt. This is Philadelphia, man. I just if this was St. Louis or Los Angeles, it would be totally different. But this is Philly, man. This is what we do.
But the example that you just gave of Donovan and Vic are two of the most opposite people in the world between the ears compared to Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts. It's like they couldn't be even more opposite. Like
right.
Carson and Jalen I think personally are going to get along fine. We've already seen on Twitter, their Twitter exchange has been pretty funny lately as far as the gifts they're sending each other and talking about playing time, joking around. I think that Carson needs a support system in that quarterback room that he trusts, that he loves and feels like they're his brothers. I think 3 years ago when we went on that run, that quarterback group in there with Frank Wright leading the group was a very strong one, and it built camaraderie. And that is something Carson needs. I don't want to say we have to coddle him, but there are things that Carson needs to succeed. And I think bringing back Marty Morningwig is going to be insurance too. And I think adding Jalen in that quarterback room is going to be so tremendously better because I'm telling you, Eagles fans, you did not want to see Nate Sudfeld come in and try to save us a game or win us a playoff game at home versus the Seahawks because that would have been just bad.
Who was that guy last year? Oh, man. That talk about worst draft picks. Clayton Thorson. Remember that guy? Woo! That was probably the worst preseason performance I've ever seen Clayton Thorson. You're right. You're absolutely right, man. Well said. Well said. The ego on McNabb is a little different than the ego on Carson Wentz. Totally different guys. Absolutely nailed it. Any other takeaways from this draft, dude?
Personally, it's my last point I have written down. I think Eagles fans need to know that this was an A-grade offseason. It's very easy to be short-sighted and recent bias and look at this draft and be like, oh, we didn't do anything. But we brought in Will Parks, who's from Germantown Academy, who's a Philly boy, born and bred. He's so happy to be home. He's a nice safety at 6'1", 210 pounds. We got Jatavius Brown, the linebacker from the Chargers, who is a quick mother. He was a 3-time All-American at Akron and was the Defensive Player of the Year when he was in college. And then we got Hargrave at D-tackle just so we can keep Fletcher very healthy and fresh and rotated. We also traded for Darius Slay. So we brought in 4 guys on defense that are studs. And we added, like we said, those 2 draft picks who were just missiles. One's going to be the Malcolm replacement that I think if he really pans out and listens to his coaches. And then we went and got speed for Carson. And then we went and got Carson a backup. Like, we did everything that we needed to do in order to fix holes and plug where we were deficient last year. And I think that Howie did a really great job of managing the cap too. Like, we're not in a hole right now. We're free next year to even add more if we want. And Howie's very big with making a trade right before the season starts. We all know when we set out Sam Bradford right when it starts. Or you can go in season and get a trade like you did with Ajay. So I think this sets us up to be very good. And it kind of separates us a little bit from Dallas, what they're doing. And I don't even consider the Giants or the Redskins relevant right now because I think they're 2-3 years away. But the Cowboys, to me, look like they're stuck in the late 90s, early 2000s where they want big, physical draft, even though we don't need it, just stock up stud players. But they have a lot of glaring holes that I didn't really see them address. So if all these players plan out to how Howie and Doug visions it, I think the division should be ours with at least 10 to 11 wins.
I think that's what I love the optimism, man. I agree. I think this is going to be a great Eagles squad. No, outside of the draft, I agree. I thought the free agency went really well. It went exactly as I thought it would. I love how they addressed the defensive line and the secondary. But in terms of win now, that's where I keep kind of getting my head stuck, is that second round, that second day of this draft, you got guys that aren't going to impact next year. I just don't think Jalen Hurts going to be that much of an impact. I don't think Davion Taylor, who I think is going to be great 2-3 years from now. I think he's got all the skills. He just literally needs to learn football. But there are so many guys in that second round, those third round, and that's what I can't get over. And that's what I want to think about this draft.
I think that what we're going to come out of with this draft is Howie, Jim, and Doug really put all their chips in the Rasul Douglas, Sidney Jones, and Arcega-Whiteside camp. Those 3 players. They didn't really address any people to kind of take their spot. So in my mind, it's telling me, they're around these guys a lot more than we are. The last time we saw Sidney Jones was 7 months ago. We have no idea what he's doing. I need to believe that my coaches in my front office that are in place believe that these 3 players I named are going to step up to the next level.
Yep.
And if that happens, then you have these players we just drafted to step into where they were last year and be the complementary players. So you're basically just plugging holes to what you think you need instead of doing like what Dallas did and just taking the best player on the board.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You just brought up the next big thought in my head, and that is, you know who has the most work this offseason? It is Aaron Moorhead, the wide receivers coach. He's got all of these guys now to really kind of season up really fast. And I can't remember. Marken Manuel, I think, is the new secondary coach. So, I mean, talk about like Sidney Jones and Marken Manuel better be working nonstop, 24/7, round the clock, because they need Sidney Jones to be that outside cornerback, because that's how I see, this roster. They got a lot of nickel corners, but they don't really have a pure lockdown. Or I guess who is the guy outside on the other side of Darius Slay? I guess it's probably
that's what's going to be the battle.
Yep. You got
Maddox, you got Sidney Jones, and you got Rasul Douglas, who I want to see. Let's have the three of them open spot for who wants to play alongside Darius Slay, and let's see. And another name we didn't talk about, we signed him as an undrafted free agent out of Baylor, was Grayland Arnold.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever, dude, nobody really knows this kid. He wasn't drafted for that. I don't know why, but go on YouTube and watch Grayland Arnold's tape from Baylor. He played Oklahoma 3 times. He played Texas 4 times. This guy lined up against CD, all that crap. He intercepted Jalen Hurts. Like, he is a player from a big school, and he's not going to be a starter on the outside, and he's not going to be a safety. But when you see teams go 4 and 5 wide, this guy's going to come in and going to mark that 3rd or 4th wide receiver, and he's going to shut them down. He really is a shutdown corner in that aspect. He's not going to shut down the number 1 and number 2 wide receiver. But when you go in those large packages, shotgun 4th quarter, and you need somebody to make a stop, this kid's going to make the team, I think, and he's going to be an okay player.
I really like their undrafted free agents. There's a list of them that are pretty impressive, and that's just the thing, is like how he crushed day 3, but how much can you logically, realistically expect from all these guys? I've been an Eagles fan for a long, long time. I have, drank the Kool-Aid from all these 5th, 6th round picks, Nate Aloa to you name it. There are a ton of them that we get so amped up and so psyched about, yet they don't even see the field.
They don't. But like I said, this is the new NFL where you're running just speed in different sets and you're rotating people in to stay fresh because speed's the name of the game. So now you're not going to be running the 3 same corners or the 3 same wide receivers because they're going to become gassed come 3rd or 4th quarter. You need to have a rotation like we do with the D-line. And, they didn't make sexy picks, but they made guys that fit their scheme and can be used in their rotation at different aspects. And we as fans just have to trust that Howie and the front office know what the hell they're doing now.
Amen. So that is JR. Follow him on Twitter at JohnRussell215 for everything Eagles and NFL draft. Lock it down to the Blue Root TPL and check out all of our draft content at thepaintlines.com. For JR, for myself, thanks for watching, guys. Stay awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Sixers win it! Wow! Oh, man, and being just posterized, Russell Westbrook.
You love the Philadelphia Eagles. Let me get a